Sarah never expected to see an itemized bill for her existence, yet here she was, staring at a 15-page document listing everything from her first pair of baby shoes to her college tuition. The grand total, $280,000. Her parents' lawyer had delivered it that morning with a stern note, explaining that now that she had turned 30, it was time to settle accounts. She'd been dreading her birthday dinner with her parents all week. Growing up in their affluent Boston suburb, Sarah had always felt the weight of their expectations. Her father, Richard, was a respected surgeon, and her mother, Eleanor, came from old money. They had mapped out Sarah's entire life: prestigious private school, Ivy League education, and eventually joining her father's medical practice. But Sarah had other plans. After graduating from Harvard with honors, she shocked her parents by declining medical school. Instead, she poured her inheritance from her grandmother, the only family member who'd ever encouraged her independence, into starting a tech company. Her parents had been furious. "What a waste of potential," her father had said, his voice dripping with disappointment. "After everything we've done for you." That phrase, "everything we've done for you," had been the soundtrack of Sarah's childhood. Every piano lesson, every summer camp, every tutor came with the unspoken understanding that someday she would need to repay the debt. Sarah arrived at her parents' Beacon Hill brownstone at exactly 7 p.m. The house was immaculate as always, with fresh flowers in crystal vases, and the scent of her mother's signature roast filling the air. "Happy birthday, dear," her mother said, air kissing both of Sarah's cheeks. She wore a Chanel suit and pearls, as if this were a business meeting rather than a family dinner. Her father emerged from his study, martini in hand. "There's our girl, 30 years old. Where does the time go?" He didn't hug her, just gestured toward the dining room with his drink. The meal proceeded with the usual forced pleasantries. They discussed the weather, mutual acquaintances, and the latest exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts. Not once did they ask about Sarah's company, which had just secured its second round of funding. As the housekeeper cleared the plates, Richard cleared his throat. "Sarah, now that you're 30, your mother and I feel it's time we had a serious conversation about your future and your past." Eleanor nodded, her face a mask of maternal concern. "We've invested so much in you, darling. The best schools, the best opportunities, the best connections. And while we respect your entrepreneurial phase, we think it's time you honored your obligations to this family." "What obligations?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. Richard produced an envelope from his jacket pocket. "We've taken the liberty of having our attorney draft a comprehensive accounting of our investment in you. We believe in transparency, and we want you to understand exactly what your upbringing cost." Sarah's hands shook slightly as she opened the envelope and scanned the document inside. The list was meticulously detailed. $15,000 for her first-year private preschool, $8,500 for orthodontic work, $50,000 for her Sweet 16 party, $250,000 for Harvard, even $120 for the teddy bear she'd loved as a child. "You're billing me for my childhood?" Sarah whispered, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. "We're asking you to acknowledge your debt," her mother corrected, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "Most children would be grateful for such privileges." "We expect repayment to begin immediately," her father added. "Our lawyer will be in touch about setting up a payment plan. Of course, if you were to reconsider medical school, we might be willing to forgive a significant portion." Sarah carefully refolded the paper and returned it to the envelope. Years of therapy had prepared her for this moment, the culmination of a lifetime of emotional manipulation. She'd known it was coming, which is why she'd made certain preparations of her own. "I'll need to review this with my attorney," she said calmly. Her father looked surprised, then amused. "You have an attorney now, playing at being a real businesswoman." "I do," Sarah replied, standing up. "And I believe we're done here. Thank you for dinner." As she walked to her car, Sarah pulled out her phone and called her lawyer, Jessica. "They did it," she said, "just like we anticipated. Send the documents tomorrow." Are you sure about this? Jessica asked. Sarah started her car, watching the lights of her childhood home fade in the rearview mirror. Absolutely. It's time they learned who I really am. What Sarah's parents didn't know, what they had never bothered to find out, was that her entrepreneurial phase had resulted in one of the fastest-growing health tech companies in the country. She wasn't just successful, she was wealthy beyond their comprehension, and she had recently acquired the hospital network where her father practiced. 3 days after the birthday dinner, Sarah sat in her downtown office overlooking Boston Harbor. The space was minimalist and modern, nothing like her parents' traditional home. Large windows filled the room with natural light, illuminating the awards and recognitions her company had received over the past 5 years. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Carter, your parents are here." Sarah nodded. "Send them in, please." Richard and Eleanor entered, looking confused and slightly irritated. They'd never visited her office before, had never shown any interest in seeing where she worked or what she did. "Sarah, what is the meaning of this?" her father demanded, waving a thick envelope. "We received these papers from your lawyer this morning. Is this some kind of joke?" "Please sit down," Sarah said, gesturing to the chairs across from her desk. She remained standing, a power move she'd learned from watching her father all these years. "We don't have time for games," Eleanor said. "Your father has surgeries scheduled this afternoon." "Not anymore, he doesn't," Sarah replied calmly. "All of his appointments have been rescheduled." Richard's face reddened. "What are you talking about? You have no authority." "Actually, I do," Sarah interrupted. "If you'd read the documents my lawyer sent, you'd understand. 6 months ago, my company, MedTech Innovations, acquired the entire Cambridge Health Partners network, including Father's Hospital." Her parents fell silent, staring at her in disbelief. "That's impossible," Eleanor finally said. "We would have heard." "The acquisition was conducted through a holding company," Sarah explained. "I wanted it to be a surprise." She smiled thinly. "Consider it my birthday present to myself." Richard sank into a chair, his face ashen. "Why would you do this?" "The better question is, why didn't you know?" Sarah countered. "You've been so convinced of my failure, so certain that I was wasting my potential, that you never even bothered to Google my company. 5 years of success, and you never once asked a single question about my work." Sarah walked around her desk and leaned against it, facing her parents directly. "Now, about that bill you sent me. I've decided to pay it in full." She slid a check across the desk. $280,000 as requested. Consider all debts settled. Eleanor picked up the check with trembling fingers. "Sarah, we didn't really expect—" "Yes, you did," Sarah cut her off. "You've been tallying that bill my entire life. Well, now it's paid. And since we're being so transparent about our financial relationships, I've included an accounting of my own." She handed them another document. "This details the changes I'll be implementing at Cambridge Health. The nepotism that secured Father's position as chief of surgery is being eliminated. From now on, all leadership positions will be filled based on merit and peer review. Father, you're welcome to reapply for your position, but you'll be evaluated like everyone else." Richard stood up abruptly. "This is outrageous. I built that department from nothing." "With significant help from grandfather's connections and donations," Sarah corrected. "Those days are over. Cambridge Health will now operate on principles of equity and excellence, and 20% of its profits will fund scholarships for underprivileged students interested in healthcare, something you always opposed." Eleanor reached for her husband's arm, steadying him. "Sarah, please, we're your parents. We only wanted what was best for you." "No," Sarah said firmly. "You wanted what was best for your image. You wanted a daughter who would reflect your values and validate your choices. You never saw me as a person with my own dreams and aspirations." She walked to the door, signaling that the meeting was over. "I've also established a foundation in grandmother's name to support young entrepreneurs. She was the only one who believed in me, who saw me." Her father's face was a storm of emotions, anger, shock, and underneath it all, a dawning recognition. "You planned this all along. You knew we would send that bill." "I hoped you wouldn't," Sarah admitted. "I hoped that just once you might surprise me, but you're nothing if not predictable." As they reached the door, Sarah added, "One more thing. I've scheduled a family therapy session for next month. Attendance is optional, but if you're interested in having any relationship with me moving forward, I suggest you make it a priority." Her mother turned, tears in her eyes. "Sarah, despite what you think, we do love you." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Maybe you do, in your way. But love shouldn't come with an invoice. Real love is unconditional. That's something I had to learn without your help." After they left, Sarah walked to the window, watching the boats in the harbor. She felt lighter than she had in years, having finally broken free from the expectations that had confined her for so long. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "How did it go?" Sarah typed back, "Exactly as expected, but also better than I could have hoped." She had paid her parents' bill not because she believed she owed them, but to free herself from their narrative. The money meant nothing compared to the worth of her independence. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the wake-up call her parents needed to see her for who she truly was. The following weeks brought an eerie silence from her parents. Sarah threw herself into work, overseeing the implementation of new policies at Cambridge Health, while expanding MedTech's reach into 3 more states. Her company's innovative patient monitoring system was revolutionizing home healthcare, and a major medical journal had just featured her on its cover. "The future of medicine," the headline declared. Sarah's assistant knocked on her office door one rainy Tuesday afternoon. "Dr. Carter is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." Sarah's heart skipped. "My father." "No, Miss Carter, your grandfather." Sarah stood up, surprised. "Send him in, please." Dr. William Carter entered slowly, leaning on a polished mahogany cane. At 85, he remained imposing, tall and straight-backed, with the same piercing blue eyes that Sarah had inherited. Though officially retired for a decade, he still commanded respect throughout Boston's medical community. "Grandpa," Sarah said, moving to embrace him. "This is unexpected." He hugged her tightly. "Well, when my granddaughter becomes the talk of the medical establishment and puts my son in his place, I figure it's worth braving the rain." Sarah led him to the sitting area by the window. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Something stronger?" "Nothing for me," he said, settling into an armchair. "I've just come from seeing your father." Sarah tensed. I imagine he had plenty to say. William chuckled. Oh, he was in rare form, ranting about betrayal and ingratitude. "Your mother was trying to calm him down, but you know how he gets when his pride is wounded." "I do," Sarah said quietly. "And how do you feel about all this, Grandpa?" William studied her for a long moment. "Proud. Enormously proud. Not just of what you've built, though that's remarkable, but of your courage. Standing up to Richard and Eleanor was long overdue." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Your father was raised with everything handed to him. My fault, I suppose. His mother died when he was young, and I compensated by indulging him. By the time I realized my mistake, the damage was done." Sarah had never heard her grandfather speak this candidly about her father before. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want you to understand something," William said. "What they did, trying to bill you for your existence, that wasn't about money. It was about control. They're terrified of your independence because it challenges everything they believe about the world and their place in it." Sarah nodded. "I know. That's why I paid the bill. To end their control, not to validate it." "Smart girl," William said with approval. "But there's something else you should know. Your parents are not as financially secure as they appear." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean? Father's practice has always been successful, and mother's family money is mostly gone," William finished. "Your mother's inheritance was substantial but not unlimited. Their lifestyle, The house, the vacations, the social obligations, it all adds up. And your father made some unfortunate investment decisions a few years ago. Are they in trouble? Sarah asked, surprised by the concern she still felt despite everything. Not destitution, but they've been living beyond their means for years. Your father's position at the hospital was their safety net. The prestige, the connections, the guaranteed income. William sighed. I suspect that bill they sent you wasn't just about control. They actually need the money. Sarah sat back, processing this revelation. That changes things. Does it? William asked, watching her carefully. Should it? Sarah stood and walked to the window, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass. I'm not sure. Part of me thinks they deserve whatever financial hardship comes their way. But another part still loves them, William finished gently. Despite everything. Sarah turned back to him. Is that weakness? William shook his head. It's humanity, Sarah. And it's your greatest strength. You've always had the capacity to care deeply, even for those who hurt you. It's what makes you different from them. He stood slowly, leaning on his cane. I didn't come here to tell you what to do. You're more than capable of making your own decisions. I just wanted you to have all the facts. Sarah walked him to the door. Thank you for coming, Grandpa. For everything. He cupped her cheek affectionately. You know, your grandmother would be dancing with joy if she could see you now. She always said you'd outshine us all. After he left, Sarah called Jessica. Can you pull financial records for my parents, discreetly? Investigating the enemy? Jessica asked. No, Sarah replied, just trying to understand the full picture. 3 days later, Sarah had her answer. Her grandfather was right. Her parents were over-leveraged and struggling. The check she'd given them had already been deposited and used to pay off several pressing debts. Richard's annual salary from the hospital constituted over 70% of their income. Sarah sat alone in her apartment that evening, looking through old family photos. Despite the carefully curated smiles, she could now see the strain that had always been there. Her father's rigidity, her mother's anxious perfectionism. They had been trapped in a prison of their own making, and they had tried to lock her in with them. Her phone rang, a Boston General Hospital number. She answered cautiously. Ms. Carter, this is Dr. Reynolds from Boston General. I'm calling about your father, Richard Carter. He's been admitted with chest pains, and you're listed as his emergency contact. Sarah's world tilted. Is he stable for now? Dr. Reynolds assured her. Initial tests suggest it may be stress-induced, but we're running a full cardiac workup. He's asking for you. I'll be right there, Sarah said, already reaching for her keys. As she drove through the rainy night, Sarah reflected on the irony. After all these years of pushing her toward medicine, her father was now experiencing the healthcare system as a patient, while she approached as the powerful businesswoman he'd dismissed. Life had a strange way of coming full circle. Boston General's emergency department hummed with the controlled chaos typical of a busy urban hospital. Sarah strode through the automatic doors, her heart pounding with a complex mixture of concern, anger, and something else she couldn't quite name. Perhaps the residual instinct of a daughter to run to her father when called. I'm here for Richard Carter, she told the nurse at the reception desk, her voice steadier than she felt. Relation to the patient? The nurse asked without looking up. I'm his daughter. The nurse directed her to a curtained area in the cardiac monitoring unit. Sarah paused outside, taking a deep breath before pulling back the curtain. Richard lay on the hospital bed, looking suddenly older and smaller than she remembered. Electrodes connected him to beeping monitors, and an IV line snaked into his arm. Eleanor sat beside him, clutching his hand, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, makeup smudged from crying. Sarah, Eleanor said, rising quickly. Thank God you're here. Richard turned toward her, his expression a mixture of relief and embarrassment. You came. Of course I came, Sarah replied, surprised by her own certainty. Despite everything, she wouldn't have considered staying away. Dr. Reynolds entered, clipboard in hand. Ms. Carter, I'm glad you're here. We've completed the initial assessment. Your father experienced an episode of severe angina, chest pain resulting from reduced blood flow to the heart muscle. The good news is there doesn't appear to be any permanent damage, but we've detected some concerning blockages that need attention. What's the treatment plan? Sarah asked, automatically taking charge. We're recommending an angioplasty with possible stent placement. The procedure is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Dr. Reynolds glanced at Richard. Your father will need to make some significant lifestyle changes afterward. Stress reduction will be critical. Now, after the doctor left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, Richard spoke. I'm sorry you had to come all this way. Don't be ridiculous, Sarah said. You're in the hospital. Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We didn't know who else to call. William is in New York for a medical conference and... She broke off, seeming to realize how pathetic it sounded that they had no one else. Sarah looked between them. These two proud, difficult people who had shaped her in ways both positive and negative. They had no real friends, she realized. No support system beyond the superficial social connections they maintained for status. In pursuing their version of perfection, they had isolated themselves from authentic relationships. I'll stay tonight, Sarah said. Mom, you should go home and get some rest. Bring Dad some comfortable clothes for tomorrow. Eleanor looked surprised at being given instructions, but was too exhausted to argue. After she left, Sarah sat in the chair by her father's bed. You don't have to stay, Richard said, staring at the ceiling. I'm sure you have more important things to do. Probably, Sarah agreed, but I'm staying anyway. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds coming from the steady beep of the heart monitor and the occasional pages over the hospital intercom. Is this what it feels like? Richard asked suddenly. What feels like? Being a patient, powerless, at everyone else's mercy. He gestured weakly at the machinery surrounding him. I've spent my career on the other side of this equation. Sarah studied him. It's humbling, isn't it? Richard nodded slowly. I keep thinking about all the patients I've treated over the years. I wonder how many of them felt as diminished as I do right now. It was the closest thing to self-reflection Sarah had ever heard from her father. She leaned forward. Dad, why did you send me that bill? Richard was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed. It seemed like the only way to make you understand what you owed us, what you were throwing away by rejecting medicine. But why was that so important to you? Why couldn't you just be proud of what I've accomplished on my own terms? Because I was afraid, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Afraid that if you didn't need us, need me, then what was the point of all the sacrifices? What was my purpose as your father, if not to shape your future? The honesty of his answer stunned Sarah. Your purpose was to love me, she said simply, to support me becoming myself. Not a copy of you. Richard turned to look at her, his eyes glistening. I don't know how to do that. I never learned. The vulnerability in his admission cracked something open in Sarah's heart. Maybe it's not too late to learn. The next morning, Sarah sat with her mother in the surgical waiting room. Eleanor had returned, looking more composed, but still uncharacteristically subdued. Your company, Eleanor said abruptly. It's very successful, isn't it? Sarah nodded. Yes, more than I ever imagined. And you did it all without our help. I did it despite your active discouragement, Sarah corrected gently. Eleanor flinched, but didn't deny it. We thought we were protecting you. The business world can be so brutal, especially for women. Medicine seemed safer, more prestigious. You weren't protecting me, Sarah said. You were protecting yourselves, your image, your plans, your control. They fell silent as the surgeon approached. Mrs. Carter, the procedure went well. We placed 2 stents and the blood flow has been restored. Your husband is in recovery now. Relief washed over both women. As they walked toward the recovery area, Eleanor hesitated. Sarah, about the hospital, your father's position. I'm not firing him, Sarah said, "but things will change. The department will operate based on merit and results, not connections and politics. If he's as good as he's always claimed to be, he has nothing to worry about." Eleanor nodded slowly. "And the money, the check you gave us, keep it," Sarah said firmly. "Consider it a loan if your pride requires it. We can discuss repayment terms once Dad is recovered." As they approached Richard's recovery bay, Sarah touched her mother's arm. "I have one condition, though." "What's that?" "Family therapy. Real sessions, not just one token appearance. If we're going to have any relationship moving forward, we need to break these toxic patterns." Eleanor looked as though she might argue, but then sighed. "Your father won't like it. His other option is cardiac arrest from stress," Sarah pointed out, "and losing his daughter completely. He can decide which is worse." When they entered the recovery room, Richard was awake, looking groggy but alert. "The surgeon says it went well," he said. Sarah stood at the foot of his bed. "Good, because we have work to do, and you need to be healthy for it." "Work?" Richard asked. "Rebuilding," Sarah said. "Not just your heart, our family." As she looked at her parents, flawed, difficult, but still hers, Sarah realized that true freedom wasn't about cutting ties or exacting revenge. It was about setting boundaries while leaving room for growth and change. She had paid their invoice not to settle a debt, but to close one chapter and begin another. Outside the window, the Boston sky had cleared after yesterday's rain. Sarah could see her office building in the distance, where her company continued to thrive. She had built something valuable there, something entirely her own. Now came the harder challenge, building a new kind of relationship with the people who had given her life, but had never truly known how to give her love without conditions. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and old patterns to overcome. But as she watched her father take her mother's hand, a rare gesture of vulnerability from him, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected: hope. The bill had been paid. The accounts were settled. Now they could start fresh, not as creditors and debtors, but simply as people trying to find their way back to each other.